this point, you're probably pretty comfortable with training your Pokemon, which means it's time for you to start thinking about what moves you might want to use. So let's take a look at a couple of things that you might want to keep in mind. Type matchups, same type attack bonus, and move types. Have you ever wondered why during your battles in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet your moves had labels under them? Like super effective, effective, not very effective, and no effect? These are because of type matchups. Most people are familiar with the basic ones thanks to your starter Pokemon, even if you didn't know exactly what they were called. Like grass is good into water, water is good into fire, and fire is good into grass. There are 18 total types in Pokemon, and each one interacts with each other differently. Now I know this type chart looks confusing, but don't worry, most of this knowledge will come over time the more that you battle, so don't feel like you need to memorize this day one. Besides, the game helps you a little bit nowadays anyway, thanks to the labels that we just talked about. So let's take a closer look at what exactly these labels mean. When a move is labeled as super effective, this typically means that it does 2 times the damage. For example, let's look at this Sylveon. Sylveon is a Fairy-type Pokemon. Fairy-type Pokemon take super effective damage from Steel-type Pokemon, which means that a Steel-type move will do 2 times the damage to a Fairy-type Pokemon. E.g., if the move has a power of 10, it will now do 20 damage, since 10 times 2 equals 20. It is also possible for a move to be 4 times effective on a Pokemon, as nowadays in modern Pokemon, your Pokemon usually have 2 types. Let's take a look at another example. Dragonite is a flying and dragon-type Pokemon. Both flying and dragon types are weak to ice types, so both types take 2 times damage from ice type moves, which means if Dragonite gets hit with an ice type move, it will take 4 times the damage. E.g., if the move does 10 damage, Dragonite will now take 40 damage, since 4 times 10 equals 40. When a move is labeled as effective, this means that the move does 1 times damage, which means that the Pokemon is neither weak nor resists the type. So for example, if a move has a base power of 10, it'll do 10 damage, since 10 times 1 is 10. When a move is labeled as not very effective, this means that the move does 1/2 damage. For example, let's look at this Rillaboom. Rillaboom is a Grass-type Pokemon, and he's going up against a Fire-type Pokemon. Fire-type Pokemon resist Grass-type Pokemon, so if Rillaboom were to use a Grass-type move, his move would do half the damage. E.g., if the move does 10 damage, it would do 5 damage to a Fire-type Pokemon, since 10 times 1/2 equals 5. It's also possible for a Pokemon to have a 4 times resistance to a type. Let's look at Dragonite again, who we know is a Dragon and Flying type. Both Dragon and Flying both resist Grass. So if our Rillaboom from the last example uses a Grass-type move, it would do 1/4 of the damage. E.g., if the move has a base power of 10, it will now do 2.5 damage, since 10 times 1/4 equals 2.5. Lastly, when a move is labeled as no effect, this means that the Pokemon is actually immune to this type and therefore takes 0 damage. For example, let's look at Fluttermane. Fluttermane is a Ghost-type Pokemon, so if you try to use a normal-type move on it, it'll have no effect. And vice versa. If Fluttermane tries to use a Ghost-type move on a normal type, it'll also have no effect. E.g., 1 times 0 equals 0. Who would have thought there would be so much math in Pokemon, huh? But just like the timetables that you learned in school, the more you practice learning the type matchups, the easier that it gets to remember them. Especially since there can definitely be some wacky type interactions that can definitely make you scratch your head and say, huh, why does this move not do super effective damage to this Pokemon if one of its types is weak to it? But the key in that sentence is one of its types is weak to it. My favorite example of one of these wacky type interactions is Mimikyu. Mimikyu is a ghost and fairy type, just like Fluttermane. So you would think that, say, a poison type move would do super effective damage since fairies are 2 times weak to poison. However, Mimikyu is also a ghost type, which means that we have to take that into consideration as well. And ghost types actually take 1/2 damage from poison, so the move is no longer super effective against it because 2 times 1/2 equals 1, meaning that a poison type move is actually neutral against Mimikyu. But now that we understand how type matchups affect how much damage a move does to a Pokemon, let's look at how we can maximize the amount of damage that our Pokemon does based on its type. When a Pokemon uses a move that's the same type as its own type, e.g. a grass-type Pokemon uses a grass-type move, this move now gets a 1.5 times damage boost. This is known as same-type attack bonus, or STAB for short. Let's look at an example. For the purposes of this example, I have EV-trained Leafeon in attack. Let's look at the difference in damage it does when using a grass-type move versus a different type move, both of which have the same base power. Notice how the grass type move did a bit more damage? That's thanks to the same type attack bonus. Ideally, when giving your Pokemon a moveset, it's best to have at least one stab move to help you get that extra bit of damage in a pinch. But now that we know how a Pokemon's type comes into play during battles, let's look at one more type, move types. There are 3 categories of moves: physical, special, and status. Physical moves are moves that use your Pokemon's attack stat and hit your opponent on their physical defense. Special moves are moves that use your Pokemon's special attack stat and hit your opponents on their special defense. And status moves are moves that don't directly inflict damage like physical moves or special moves. Status moves include moves that change the weather, inflict a status condition like a burn, raise or lower the stats of a Pokemon, among other effects like field effects, akin to the Trick Room that I mentioned last episode. But depending on your Pokemon's stats and what role you would like them to play on your team, you'll select which moves you want to give them. For example, since Chien-Pao is a physical attacker, you probably wouldn't want to give it a special move. It would be much happier and do a lot more damage if you gave it a physical move. But if you've made it this far, congratulations! You now know how all the different types, Pokemon types, and move types, as well as same type attack bonus, can all help and in some cases harm your Pokemon during the heat of a battle, bringing us one step closer to creating a team. So stay tuned for the next episode as we keep diving deeper into the world of team building and VGC. But that is going to go ahead and wrap it up for today's episode. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you did, I kindly suggest you consider subscribing so that I can continue to make content for you guys. And if you were already subscribed and you would like another way to support the channel, feel free to check out the merch store. There is a link down below in the description that takes you to not only my merch store, but also all of my other socials so you can keep up with what I'm doing on a daily basis. But thank you all so much for watching, and thank you to those of you who have joined the channel as members. I appreciate you all so much. I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys!